Today I'm working on a double page 12 by 12 layout about our quick stop in North Rustico, PEI. This will be continuing with my Summer of Sketches series, and I thought that this layout would be the perfect chance to show you how I figure out measurements when I'm working from a sketch. I'm using this sketch right here, and if you ever looked at a sketch and thought, wait, how big is that piece supposed to be? This video is for you. Welcome to my channel, by the way. I'm Nicole, and thank you so much for being here. For my supplies, I'm working with the Woods DSP, and surprisingly, this is the first time I've ever made this as like the main paper in the layout. So I'm working with this collection plus a few pieces of cardstock. This wood grain is a huge go-to for me because it adds so much texture, a bit of like this rustic charm, and it really works well with just about any style or layout. I've used, bits and pieces here and there, but I've never had it as like the star of the show. Now I'm down to a couple of full sheets and a pile of scraps, so I felt like this was the perfect time to, give it some extra love. And it pairs perfectly with the photos that I am documenting. This particular sketch was created by Allison Davis, and I found it in a really old Creating Keepsakes magazine from 2009. So I'm starting with white Willow cardstock as the base for this layout. When I'm determining measurements from a sketch, I usually start by looking at the photos, specifically their size and orientation. 4x6 photos are the easiest to spot, so that is where I begin. The sketch includes one portrait 4x6, which I'm using this picture of the restaurant that we ate at. There are two stacked landscape 4x6 over on the left. Now, confession time. I didn't actually take this photo of the restaurant. I have this one. But when I went to their website to kind of jog my memory before I started this layout, I spotted this gorgeous stock photo and I just couldn't resist. We actually sat in one of these spots in the window, so the view from there was fantastic. And I'm happy to claim this for my album. Now, let's move on to the smaller photos. The sketch shows 3 that are about the same size. 2 landscape, 1 portrait. Slightly smaller than 4x3. I'm thinking closer to 3 3/4 by 2 inches. But for simplicity's sake, and because I like how everything kind of lines up evenly, I printed mine to 4x3. So now that we've figured out photo sizes, let's move on to paper measurements. Starting with the vertical strip that sits behind the 4x6 portrait photo, I'm thinking of using red cardstock. So this is Poppy Parade, and I'm using the true side for this piece. There's red in the restaurant sign and, of course, the lobster. So I think this will tie in nicely. It looks like it's, just slightly wider than the photo itself. And since that photo is 4 inches wide and there's about 1/4 of an inch showing on either side, I'm calling the strip 4.5 inches wide, and it runs the full length of the page, so it's 4.5 by 12 inches. So one thing I always say when working with sketches, they're jumping off points, not rules that you have to follow exactly. Unless, of course, you want to, but that's completely up to you. In terms of the wood grain paper selection, I pulled out 3 patterns. The other options are either very dark or have touches of yellow that I didn't think would complement my photos well. There's a lot of blue in the pictures, from the bright skies to the color of the restaurant. So I'd rather bring in touches of blue here. So I'm going to pull that one out, and that leaves me with these two. Really, I could go either way. I like the gray tones in this paper. There's a lot of black within the photos, and I think the gray works well kind of with that. But the white and brown wood grain is tempting too, because it complements the red earth. But in the end, I'm leaning towards the gorgeous gray wood grain. It's got subtle shades running through that ties in beautifully with my photos. Plus, I should have just enough for both sides of the layout. Before I decide the measurements for the wood grain, let's figure out the strips along the bottom of the page. For that, I'm using my last sheet of Pebbled Path cardstock. It's a retired color, so I've been saving it, but it matches the gray tones in that wood grain perfectly. Today it's going to get used. I'm sliding it into place, tucking it under the red cardstock. So looking at the sketch, the top of the upper 4x6 photo sits about 2 inches down from the top of the layout. And the lower small photo is about the same distance from the bottom. So that helps me determine the height of the gray cardstock. Since the layout is 12 inches wide, and I've already used 4.5 inches, that leaves me with 7.5 inches for this section. The top of the Pebbled Path lands about 1 inch down from the top of the smaller photo. So with my T-ruler, I measured. 3.5 inches tall looks just right. Next is the smaller horizontal strip. I like working with simple numbers, so I'll cut it to 1 inch tall by 7.5 inches wide. Now on the left page, these strips run the full 12 inches long, so that leaves the wood grain to fill in the rest. I grabbed a 9x9 square scrap I'd cut from the center of a sheet, ages ago, and I'll tuck that in for a visual. That's actually a pretty good fit. Now I like a little white space on most of my layouts, so I'll scooch that down slightly, and that feels right. And now if you like the look without the white edge, just adjust yours accordingly. Before I trim my papers to size, I need to decide which way I want the wood grain panels to run. Horizontal or vertical. The siding in the restaurant runs horizontal, so I could echo that, but I'm really liking the look of the lines running vertical. While I decide, I'm going to go ahead and trim all the other layers down to size, and I'll surprise you with my choice. In the end, I went with vertical. It just looked better to my eye. Surprise! One quick note, the gray cardstock on the right, I ended up cutting that to 8 inches wide instead of 7.5, so I'd have a little extra to tuck under the red cardstock. The last strip, that 1 inch piece, I haven't cut it yet. Off camera, I spotted a scrap of wood grain paper. It's closer to 1/2 inch tall, but I think it works. And since I don't have a full sheet of that pattern paper anymore, and this side is one of my favorites, I'm happy to save as much as possible. So I'll cut another 1/2 inch strip for the right side. To carry the red from the right side over to the left, I cut a mat for the photo of the back side of the restaurant, that stock photo that I did not take. Then I cut mats from Night of Navy cardstock for the 2 remaining photos. One of the mats is way too big, so I will trim that down. I'm loving how nautical this layout is starting to feel. Before I start adding embellishments and the title, I'm going to ink distress the edges with Pebbled Path. While I was off camera, I also cut another navy mat to place my journaling on. The sketch shows journaling in this area, so I'm going to do the same. I'm really pleased with the colors in this design, but I would like to introduce a few additional hues to add kind of more depth and interest. I don't typically use this many colors in a layout, but with all the vibrant scenery here in Atlantic Canada, I find myself stepping gracefully out of my comfort zone. I did some stash diving and found a collection called Carried Away. It's retired from Stampin Up, and I wish I knew exactly what year it was from. While not all the colors are current, I think they blend really well with my palette. And let me bring in Pumpkin Pie. I'm going to use the lighter shade because it looks like a closer match. And Coastal Cabana, which I think will work perfectly. I especially love the wave pattern, and it fits right in with that coastal nautical theme that I'm going for here. I looked it up, and I believe this DSP is from 2017, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to cut some basic shapes and tags from the DSP in various sizes to use as layering pieces throughout the layout. So for my title, I turned to my Cricut and I used the print then cut feature. I like mixing fonts. So for Seaside, I used a font called Bright Sunset in Coastal Cabana. And for Supper, I tried to find a font close to the one that they used on the restaurant sign itself. So this is Century Schoolbook. And I printed that, or used Night of Navy with a white offset all around it all. And so it reads Seaside Supper. I have a few tags cut out using dies from my stash, along with a circle and several banners made with the Nested Essentials dies. This set is fantastic, not only for the variety of nesting shape, but also for the detailed double stitching that cuts along the edges. I also use the Spotlight on Nature dies to cut out a circle from white cardstock. It looks like a plate. At least it does to me. And I can't resist adding a plate whenever I'm making a layout with food in the pictures. I'm going to tuck that under this photo here on the far right to start that embellishment cluster. And then I'll place the larger tag over on the far left, kind of lower corner. And what if I tuck another tag behind the plate? Yeah. I pulled in a few stamp sets. I have Ocean Friends, Seaside Wishes, and Beauty of the Deep. I'm mainly using the dies here. I believe they are all retired and no longer available, except for the dies that coordinate with the Ocean Friends stamp set. I'll cut out a variety of shapes like coral, sand dollars, and other sea-inspired elements in all the colors I'm using on this layout. Having these pieces ready lets me create balanced clusters and adds charming little details that really bring that coastal theme to life. While digging through my stash, I found a sticker sheet that's perfect for this layout. The colors are spot on, and it's full of lighthouses and other themed icons that I can use. I removed the sticky from several stickers using my anti-static pouch. So now I can move them around the page more freely. I keep all my embellishments and stickers handy in this bin, so they're always close by when I need them. This DSP was a fantastic find, but if you don't have something similar in your stash, you can easily swap it out for a plain cardstock in any color that complements your photos. I'll tuck these two lighthouses in behind the title. This will tie everything together beautifully. I'm starting with the larger elements first. placing them in and around the 2 clusters I started. I stamped a few lobsters. This one is stamped in Poppy Parade. I stamped off once for the fill color, then I used full strength for the outline, and I'll place that up here sitting on the plate. Then I stamped another in Pumpkin Pie using that same technique. Maybe that can go here on the lower left. I also have a few sand dollars ready to go. By repeating colors throughout the clusters, I'm creating visual triangles that help guide the eye. We drove through North Rostico on the way to Green Gables, but we didn't stop. We were eager to get to the museum. Still, that little town intrigued me. So on the way back to Charlottetown, we decided to pull off and explore. And honestly, that unplanned stop turned out to be a real highlight. To balance off the white plate on the right side, I'm going to add this white coral cut from the Ocean Friends dies. I'll tuck it peeking out from behind the photo. Then I'll place a few sand dollars around it. I accidentally ripped this coral die cut while removing it from the die, but that's okay. Once it's stuck into place, no one will even know. The town had all the charm of that classic maritime gem. Colorful buildings, friendly locals, and a lighthouse standing proudly by the shore. We wandered around, strolling along the water's edge, and then we made our way to the world-famous Fisherman's Wharf for supper. The restaurant was fantastic, with the harbor views so pretty that it almost distracted me from the food. Almost. There was a 60-foot salad bar. Yep, really. Endless mussels and clam chowder, and of course, lobster. To add a third point of that wave pattern paper, I'm using these banner elements that I had cut out earlier. I'm tucking it under the journaling spot, and I'll add a orange banner next to it using the lighter side of Pumpkin Pie cardstock. There's no people in my photos. Just the buildings and the food. I'm a little embarrassed to admit I didn't get a picture of the person in front of the feast. It was probably my husband James, decked out in his lobster bib. I was just so focused on the lobster. Next time, I'll try to remember, that human element. It makes the memory feel a little bit more personal and a little less like I'm scrapbooking someone else's supper. Off camera, I typed and printed my journaling onto white cardstock, making it just slightly smaller than the mat I already had in place. I included the detail about driving by North Rustico and wanting to stop and look at the village. So I'm going to include this picture I took from my car on the way to Green Gables. And this sketch shows a smaller photo in this spot over here. But I have this open space right on the right side. So if I, bump things over just a smidge, it'll fit in nicely. I printed the photo to 3x4, the same size as the rest of the photos, but this one is portrait. This little town really caught my attention, and I'm so glad that we did stop. We didn't pre-plan this trip, and I've mentioned this before, which meant we had the flexibility to stop whenever something caught our eye and, really soak in more of this beautiful part of Canada. I cut out a knife and a fork with my Cricut using Pebbled Path cardstock to sit on the plate with the lobster. Not that you really use utensils to eat lobster, or do you? To bring in a touch of the gray color to the top left page, I'm adding a tab that I punched with the Keeping Tabs punch, and I stamped the word memories on it. And I'll tuck that right here on what I guess you could call my focal photo. So for the tags, I'm adding white twine. I'm really enjoying Stampin' Up's twine and all of the colors that it comes in. I thought about using a different color, but I like the crisp look of the white best. I also have a thin red ribbon that I think will look nice. I could loop the ribbon through the hole first, then tie a white twine around it. Let me find that ribbon and I'll be right back. Yeah, I think that filled in the space so much better. I enjoy adding little verbal details to my layout. I used the Celebrate Together stamp set and stamped Vacation Vibes, as well as the memories on that tab. I also used the Tags to Go stamp set for the phrases Life's detours are better with you and enjoy. This set is currently in the last chance section at a discounted price. So if you had your eye on it, you might want to grab that before it's gone. For the finishing touches, I added the Sunny Day iridescent dots in the light blue and orange colors, along with Opal Rounds assortment dots, only using the navy blue ones to keep within my color scheme. I placed them around the clusters in groups of 3, mixing sizes and colors. I think this layout turned out so fun. No people, but the story and the place are what I wanted to document. I know we were there, right? Here's a close-up of the finished layout. I popped up the title with dimensionals, overlapping the photo so that it feels grounded rather than floating. I love the lighthouses tucked behind it. You could easily omit them and add extra, sand dollars or sea life instead. I just love this clean lines and simple embellishment on this layout. With that pop of red down the column, it really makes a statement. Let's bring the sketch back in one more time. I hope I've given you some helpful tips on how I approach measurements when creating a layout. Thanks for hanging with me today while I worked on this page, lobster, twine, and all. If you enjoyed this project, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you scrapbook pictures that don't have any people in them? For still shots, head over to my Instagram page and here's a playlist of my Summer of Sketches series for you to watch next. Until next time, keep telling your stories one page at a time. Bye.